start this by saying that this topic can be boring, exciting, and divisive at the same time. Okay? There are some of you in this room, you're saying, I don't really want to talk about these types of topic. Medyo mabigat. Hindi naman natin kailangan sa ano natin yan, sa faith natin, yung mga ganitong klaseng topic. Kuya, just give me the practical teachings, the ones that we used to have every Sunday. Yung mga tipong teaching na kayang-kaya ko kagad i-apply right away when I go out of this room and live my Christian life. Bigay mo sa akin yun. Okay? Babalik tayo next week. Pabayaan nyo na ako ngayon. 2 weeks lang naman. 2 weeks lang naman to. There are times that we really have to talk about this, and so just give me these 2 weeks. Last week na ito, last week na ngayon, and then we're going to go back to our normal programming. We're going to go back to those typical practical theological teachings that we normally have. Now, some of you though, you are a seasoned Christian, matagal na kayong Kristiyano, and you have been taught about a certain eschatological or yung end times events teaching. So meron na kayong framework na iniisip. And sometimes, ito palang topic na to, na-realize ko talaga, especially sa mga Kristiyano, napaka-emotional nitong topic na to. Kasi, lalo na sa mga seasoned Christians, kapag pinag-usapan na to, ang daming discussions na nangyayari. Di ba last week, pinost ko tong message na to sa Facebook page ko? Ang daming comments, positive, negative. In fact, there was someone that I know, we had a chat. Sabi niya, alam mo, I feel like you are mocking our eschatological perspective. I told him, alam mo, dun sa audience namin sa Life City, when I preach about this, there are also some futurists that are present, and we even had our life groups right after that, and they didn't feel alluded to or na I am mocking the futurist perspective, because I've said firsthand na sinabi ko kagad, it is something that is debatable. We can talk about this. It's okay to disagree, because this is not a topic that should be a cause for division. It is a topic that doesn't have to be a test of fellowship within a church. So okay lang if you are a futurist, some are not futurist, and that's fine. We can talk about it. So, no, I'm not. When I say I disagree with a particular doctrinal issue, it's not meant to be mocking. If I say, I feel like this particular eschatological perspective causes fear, I'm just stating a fact, because some people are actually experiencing that. And so I'm not trying to mock a particular perspective. So if you're a Christian, meron na kayong perspective sa eschatology, that's fine. I'm just here to tell you that probably there are some out there, some eschatological perspective out there that are also Christians are also believing. And so maybe this is a time for you also to talk, to evaluate sa other perspective. So that's one. For some of you, you are genuinely interested in knowing what we're going to talk about today. Parang blank canvas kayo. And that's wonderful. You want to learn. You want to learn a different perspective, or you want to learn a new perspective about eschatology. Okay? And when we talk about eschatology, again, we mentioned last week, we are talking about the study of the end times, or study of the end of the world. Again, yun yung ating pinag-uusapan. What are the things that are going to happen towards the end of the world? So again, I'm going to try to be fast, precise, especially for those of you who are saying, wag na natin pag-usapan yan. No, my promise is I'm going to be fast. So I have my notes here again right now. I'm going to be reading some of the stuff, unusual dito na ginagawa natin normally. So I'm going to be fast, I'm going to try to be precise, and then I'm going to try to make sure that all of us will end this talk, that we can get out here and have something to carry with us. All right? May practical application tayo. All right? So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to try to make an evaluation or ililay down natin itong dalawang perspective na pinag-uusapan natin, yung eschatological doctrine or eschatological perspective. Ililay down natin yan para malaman din natin. Magkaroon tayo ng idea kung ano ba yung pinag-uusapan natin dito. Ililay down ko yung futurist perspective, and then I'm going also to lay down the preterist or partial preterist perspective para ma-evaluate nyo pareho kung ano ba yung difference nung dalawa na yon. Titingnan natin yung timeline. Okay, maganda to kasi minsan kapag pinag-uusapan natin yung future events, gusto natin malaman kailan ba mangyayari itong mga bagay na ito. Diba? So, gagawin natin yan. So, I want your undivided attention hopefully, for the next 40 minutes. Undivided attention, sana nakatingin lang kayo dito at nakatingin sa screen kasi dyan ko ipapakita yung timelines. Okay? So, let's start with the futurist perspective. Futurist na pinag-usapan natin. Now, most popular sa futurist perspective or futurist idea or view of eschatology is that we call this dispensational premillennialism. Again, maraming mga nuances ang futurism, but this is the most popular within the Christian circles, yung dispensational premillennialism, and that's what we're going to be talking about, going to be representing the futurist perspective. So the first part ng kanilang timeline is what we call the church age. No? The church age. This is the current dispensation. Ito yung tayo ngayon, no? Also known as the age of grace. It begins with the life and death of Christ, and it will end with the rapture. We're going to talk about the rapture later, no? From the death of Christ to the end of the rapture. During this period, salvation is offered to all through faith in Christ. Now, let me just medyo segue, no? Ito yung tinatawag natin dispensational approach. Kasi maraming mga dispensationalists kung tawagin. Now, let me just say that there are three theological frameworks na tinatawag tayo. Theological frameworks, we're not going to talk about it, pero just so you know, meron tayong tinatawag na covenant theology, new covenant theology, and dispensationalism. Okay? Covenant theology, new covenant theology, and dispensationalism. Ang mga pastor nyo dito, we believe in new covenant theology. Okay? Yung dispensationalism, ito yung marami ding mga Christians na may view na ganito. So if you want to talk about this some more, eventually you can approach me, you can chat with me, so we could we could discuss about the differences between the three. So that's the first part of the timeline. The second part is what we call the rapture. The rapture. Dispensational premillennialists believe in a tribulation rapture where Christians both dead and alive, no, will be caught up to meet Jesus in the air before the period of tribulation. So itong part na to, na we call the rapture, this is going to happen first before the tribulation. Tinatawag din ng tribulation. Now, some sort of history about this perspective. For those of you who are mahilig sa history of the world, the history of your beliefs. Now, this view that the rapture and the return of Jesus are different events, kasi different events ang second coming, particularly dito sa view na to, the rapture and the return of Christ, different events yan. Separated by 7 years, was relatively unknown before the 19th century. The only earlier historical reference to that doctrine has been found in the writings of Dr. John Hill, 1748, and Morgan Edwards, 1788. The rapture theory was not accepted by any known group until a British religious leader named John Nelson Darby publicly brought it up in the Powers Court Conference in Ireland in 1830 to 1833. Darby claimed to have received the rapture revelation about 1827. So it's just fairly recent, no? Now, merong isang nuance to. Ito yung tinatawag nila. So, merong rapture where the church will be caught up in the air physically in heaven, and then they will be brought to heaven for 7 years, while the tribulation happens for 7 years. But there's a nuance. Meron tayong tinatawag din na isang belief na sinasabi nila merong secret rapture. Nakarinig na kayo ng secret rapture? Yung sinasabing secret rapture. Alam ko narinig niyo ito kasi may movie na ganito. Yung Left Behind. Okay? Ang idea itong Left Behind, galing to sa books ni Tim LaHaye, tsaka yung isa, nakalimutan ko yung, dalawa sila Tim LaHaye. Series of books yan, tawag nila doon, Left Behind series. Tapos nagkaroon nga ng movie adaptation. Ang idea nitong Left Behind series or yung secret rapture is that there will be a time before the tribulation, the Christians who believe, those who are believers of Christ, they will be secretly raptured to heaven. Immediately, yung tinatawag nilang the twinkling of an eye. No? In the twinkle of an eye. First Corinthians 15:52, yung kanilang reference dito, which is, I think, a stretch doon sa meaning ng text. But anyway, ito yung ibig nila sabihin dito. Bigla na lang mawawala daw yung mga Kristiyano. Kaya, yung sa Left Behind movie, ito yung tinatawag nila na pagka yung mga airplanes magka-crash kasi yung mga pilot na Kristiyano, bigla na lang mawawala. So magkakaroon chaos yung mga nagda-drive ng sasakyan, bigla na lang mawawala, magkakaabagaan, ganun sila. Ito nanggaling din yung Christian joke na, oy, kapag pumunta kayo sa church next week, wala kami dito, hindi ibig sabihin na rapture na kami. Napunta lang kami doon or yung service namin ginawa lang doon sa isang lugar. Yan. Yun yung mga joke ng mga Kristiyano. Di ba? Kasi yung mga joke na yan, si Kuya Puti, gino-joke niya rin yan dati. Kasi nakuha namin yan sa CCF na joke kay Peter Tanchi. Now, yun yung secret rapture. Sabi nila, magkakaroon ng ganong klaseng event secretly na mag-rapture. Although, not all pre-trib or premillennialists are believing that. No? So that's the secret rapture or the rapture, the time where Jesus Christ or the Christians or the church will be caught up in the air or be brought to heaven. Then meron tayong tinatawag na tribulation period. Following the rapture, a 7-year tribulation or period of tribulation will occur on earth. This period is characterized by suffering, natural disasters, and the rise of the Antichrist. It's often divided into 2 halves of 3.5 years each, with the second half being more intense, sometimes referred to as the Great Tribulation. So mangyayari, maraming mga natural disaster, magkakaroon ng sufferings, magkakaroon ng wars, ganyan. And then, there will be an Antichrist, o yung tinatawag nilang may sign, mayroong mark of the beast na 666. So ang tanong natin, dito sa perspective na to, who is the Antichrist and the mark of the beast that has the 666? Yung medyo nakakatakot na mga ganyang nakikita natin, di ba? Meron nagsasabi kasi, marami yan. Dito sa perspective na to, by the way, sabi dito, this calls for wisdom. Saan ito? Sa Revelations 13:18, dito nila kinuha yun. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, or the Antichrist daw, no? For it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Madaming mga nakikita tayo sa movies niya, yung 666, di ba? Maraming mga perspective sila na sinasabi, although this is more speculative. Yung mga teachers naman ng futurist perspective, sabi nila, these are just speculations. Sabi nila, this is a future leader, a charismatic leader that is going to deceive a lot of people. Yun daw yun. Sabi nila, yung iba rin perspective, katulad din ng pinanggalingan namin, sabi nila, ang 666 or yung Antichrist would be the Pope. Yung 666 daw, yung sign niya, yung Vicarius Filii Dei. Nakalagay daw sa ng Pope. Sabi nila, ganon. Yung iba naman sinasabi nila, it is just symbolic. Yung 666, just symbolic, no? It's a symbol of perfect satanic rebellion against God. So if everyone rebelling against God, that's 666. Or some people actually make 666 as literal. Nakarinig na kayo na sinasabi nila, yung 666 daw, yung mga chips, mga electronic chips na nilalagay sa kamay at saka sa forehead. Pag wala ka raw doon, if you don't receive the electronic chips and on your hand and on your forehead, hindi ka makakabili, hindi ka makaka-travel. So, you have to receive the mark, which is the chips and the forehead. In the forehead and the hand. Yun ang sabi nila. Yun daw. And these are speculative. So, yung iba, in fact, meron ako nakita na interview, sabi niya daw sa parents niya, okay lang wag niyong tanggapin si Christ ngayon. Okay lang. Pero pagka meron nagsabi sa inyo na tanggapin niyo itong chips na to sa hand at sa forehead, wag niyong tatanggapin. Wag niyong tatanggapin kasi daw, yun daw ang mark of the beast. Wala ka ng chance na tanggapin si Christ pagka daw nag-mark of the beast ka. So yun ang part na to, itong sa part ng tribulation. It's going to be a 7 years of suffering. Now, after the 7 years of suffering, ito na yung second coming of Christ. At the end of tribulation, Jesus Christ will return to earth, defeat the Antichrist and his forces in the battle of Armageddon, and establish His millennial kingdom. Jesus Christ will come here on earth. Yun daw yung sa part na to. After that, the final judgment and eternity. So millennium pala. Millennium. Dito sa Revelation chapter 30, there's a part where it's saying there's millennium where Christ will reign. Sabi dito, this is a literal 1,000-year reign of Christ on earth, a period marked by peace and righteousness. Satan will be bound during this time, and Christ will reign with those who have been resurrected or raptured. So 1,000 years, sabi nila, Christ will reign here on earth, peace, prosperity, and those who are resurrected will be reigning with Christ here on earth. And then the final judgment in eternity, after the 1,000 years, Satan will be released for a final rebellion, which will be quickly quashed. This will be followed by the great white throne judgment, the judgment for those who did not follow Christ, where all the dead will be judged. Then a new heaven and a new earth will be established for the eternal state. So that's after the 1,000 years, according to the futurist view, that's the time that God or Christ will establish, or there will be judgment, and then Christ will establish a new heaven and a new earth here on earth. So yun ang timeline ng futurist view, particularly sa perspective ng dispensational premillennialist. Now, the futurist view is sometimes referred to as a pessimistic eschatology. Okay? And this is not mocking it. I'm not mocking the perspective, ha? It's just what it is. No, some people actually, it's a consensus from different scholars who study these things. Sabi nila, it is characterized by the decline of morality. Itong view na to. They believe that people are going to be immoral over time. There will be wars, there will be famine. And I've spoken with another futurist, Christian. Sabi niya, even AI, yung AI ngayon, ano daw yan? It's a sign that it's going to be used for not for God's glory, but for the furtherance of satanic influences here on earth. Yan. Yun daw ang mangyayari. So that's why every time there's a negative event that's happened, there's war in Israel, there's things going on in the world, no? Hamas and famine and earthquake. Every time there's negative event that happens in the world, it is, sasabihin nila, it's a sign of the last days. I call it yung palagi na lang, alarmist ang dating. No? That's my personal opinion. My personal note. Alright? And that's the reason why it was called the pessimistic view. Yung futurist view. Alright? So that's the futurist view. Now, let me present to you what the other perspective. When I say the other perspective, this does not necessarily mean that it's because it's not popular, it is wrong. It is just that this is the less adopted, less popular eschatological perspective. Ito yung tinatawag natin na partial preterist view. Partial preterist view. So, for me to lay down yung timeline ng partial preterist view, let's go back to what we talked about last week, sa Matthew 24, yung tinatawag natin na Olivet Discourse. Diba? Sabi dito, Jesus Christ left the temple, again, this is what's going on, no? Let me explain this later on. He left the temple and was going away when his disciples came to point to him the buildings of the temple, Jerusalem temple, around 30 AD. But he answered them, you see all this, do you not? Truly I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down. So Jesus was pointing to the temple. He's saying, darating ang panahon. Lahat ito magwigiba. Walang isang bato na magkapatong na makikita kayo. Walang isang magkapatong. Lahat ito magwigiba, sabi ni Jesus. And so the disciples in verse 3, they ask Jesus. Sabi nila, tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of age? Tinanong si Jesus noong mga disciples niya. And so to summarize the question, they actually asked him three questions. Sabi niya, when will these things be? When will these things happen? The destruction of the temple. When will be the sign of your coming? Okay? And what will be the end of the world? What will be the end of age or end of the world? Now, first and foremost, yung first question, we know that Jesus, last week pinag-aralan natin to, Jesus answered the question really well. Sabi niya, ito yung bago na mangyari yung bagay na yan, when will this thing be? Sabi niya, there will be an antichrist, there will be famine, there will be wars and rumors of wars, there will be ano ba yun? Earthquakes. Di ba? Yun yung pinag-usapan natin kahapon. Nangyari yun. Before the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. And naman, what will be the sign of your coming? Normally, itong mga futurist views, ang futurist teachers, binabasa nila kagad yun na second coming. Hindi naman yun ang sinasabi ng text. Ang sabi ng text, when will be the sign of your coming? Imagine natin, ito kasing mga Hudyo, they were actually asking Jesus, iniisip nila, tinatanong nila si Jesus, kailan ka magiging, when are you going to establish your kingdom? When is your coming to your kingdom? Kasi they're looking for someone who will deliver them. Di ba? So this is the time that Jesus Christ said to them, this is going to happen. And Jesus became, when he ascended to heaven, when he sat at the right hand of God, that is the time when he established his kingdom on earth and here on heaven and here on earth. Yun yung time na when Jesus Christ was given authority in heaven and on earth, he established his kingdom. Di ba nung umakyat si Christ sa heaven, sabi niyang Bible, he sat down at the right hand of the Father. Yun yung time na the time of his coming na sinasabi. Hindi yung second coming. And so Jesus Christ answered them these two things. Mangyayari yan before the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. So nangyari yun 70 AD. And then yung third question, when will the end of age come? Alam natin mangyayari yan kasi nung Matthew 10:24-34, sabi niya, truly I say to you, the generation will not pass, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Lahat daw yon mangyayari. Yung two things na yon. Now, he transitioned to answer the third question. We notice that he transitioned kasi nung next verse, yung verse 36, sabi niya, but concerning that day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. And then he talked about the entire chapter 25, yung about the parable of the 10 virgins. Sabi niya, you have to be ready because we don't know the time of His coming. And that will happen in the future. Yun yung second coming ni Jesus Christ. So, ito yung timeline. Yung ng partial preterist. Ang tinatawag na the last days ng partial preterist sa perspective na to is happened during the time of Jesus until the destruction of Jerusalem noong AD 70. Yun ang last days. Kaya siya tinawag na last days, that means it is the last days of the reign of the Jewish religious system. After that, nung nasira ng religious system ng Jerusalem, ng mga Hudyo, that is now the start of the new covenant. That's why we, as those who believe in the new covenant theology, love this perspective. Kasi meron siya talagang makikita mo na separation. Nung nasira ng Temple of Jerusalem, that means that's the judgment of Christ sa mga Hudyo because of not believing in Christ. And now this is the new age. This is now the new covenant na in-establish ni Christ sa kanyang church. So that's the first one. Now, doon magkakaroon dito ng tribulation, di ba sinasabi natin during that time, nagkaroon ng tribulation before, for about 7 years. 7 years period. And this happened when, ang hirap, medyo graphic yung nangyari nung time na yun, we talked about it last week. But meron din tinatawag na tribulation time from AD 63 to AD 70. 7 years din yan. And in the middle of that year, meron din tinatawag na Antichrist and 666. Now, speculative din to. Speculative, some partial preterists believe that the 666 or the mark of the beast or the beast during that time was Emperor Nero. He was the one who let the Christians suffer tremendously during that persecution time. Si Nero. Bakit sinabi nilang ganon? Merong magandang, pinag-usapan kasi natin to, so pag-usapan na rin natin itong magagandang mga items na ganito eh. Gusto natin mga number. Kasi nung time na pinipersecute ang mga Kristiyano, sa Revelation, when John was writing this letter to the churches, sabi ng mga teachers ng ng preterist or partial preterist teachers na binabasa ko, sabi nila, it could be that John was actually writing them in codes so that people they will not be, alam mo yan, parang mapapahamak sila pag nakita yung sulat nila. So when Apostle John, who wrote the book of Revelation, he wrote, ang mark ng beast ay 666. He was actually referring to somebody in that generation. Okay? Alam naman natin mga Roman numerals, pinag-usapan natin yan, pinag-aralan natin yan nung di ba? Nung elementary, ng high school. May mga number L, yung L ay 550, ganun, di ba? X is 10, mga ganun, di ba? Pinag-aralan natin yan. So, doon din sa Greek alphabet, merong ganun. Ito daw yung sabi nila. Yan. Pag kinumpute mo yan, 666 yan. Alam mo ang tawag dyan, yung letter na yan? Ang basa dyan is Neron Caesar. Neron Caesar. Which is Nero Caesar. Alright? So, it could be, speculative pa rin, it could be that John was actually referring to Emperor Nero as the 666. So, dito sa perspective nito, wala nang chips. Wala nang future tribulation. Wala na. Kasi nangyari na to nung AD 70 during the destruction of Jerusalem. At based on some speculations, it could be Nero who is the who is the beast, or he has the mark of the beast 666 because of his name. Yeah? So yun ang sabi nila. So okay, so after ng tribulation, meron tayong tinatawag na the Millenial Reign of Christ. So after the tribulation, sabi ng 7-year tribulation, merong 1,000 years. 1,000 years, 1,000 years of reign of Christ. Ito yon, 1,000 years. Now, sa perspective ng mga partial preterists, ang 1,000 years is not literal. It's actually a symbolic. Kasi sa Bible, ang 1,000 means it's a long time and it's indefinite. Bibigyan ko ng example. Sa Psalms chapter 84, verse 10. Psalms 84, verse 10. Sabi dito, and alam nyo to kasi kanta to sa mga music team. Kanta to Sabi nila sa 84:10, for a day in your courts is better than 1,000 elsewhere. Marami pang ibang reference, pero ito lang yung sinabi ko dahil alam nyo tong song na to For a day in your courts is better than 1,000 elsewhere. Ibig sabihin, a day in your courts is better than 1,000 days? Hindi naman, di ba? Ang ibig sabihin lang nun, it's indefinite, matagal na matagal. So itong millennial reign of Christ, according to this perspective, it's indefinite. And we are now living in this millennial reign of Christ. Ngayong panahon natin ngayon, this is part of the indefinite, long, symbolic millennial reign of Christ. The millennial 1,000-year reign of Christ, 1,000 years reign of Christ is happening now indefinitely. No one knows when will it end because it's a long time. So what will happen? We expect a golden age of Christian dominance and righteousness before the second coming of Christ. Okay? Meaning Christ's kingdom is going to grow. Some Christian futurist, sabi nila, no, hindi mangyayari yan, hindi pa yan nangyari. Pero here's what I'm going to show you. Ito yung nangyari sa Christian church. Ang dami, ang laki, ngayon 2 billion na ang mga Kristiyano. And it's growing exponentially. Sabi nila, hindi, nagiging lukewarm nga ang mga Kristiyano. No, it's just a Western perspective. Kasi sa States, tsaka sa Canada, mga Kristiyano doon ayaw mag-attend ng church na. Pero elsewhere, alam nyo ba na 20,000 people in every day are being converted in China? In Africa, in South America, about 35,000 people are being converted every single day. According to this book that I'm reading, every day, the growth of Christianity in the world is now about 1 million to 1.5 million converts a day. So, ang mga panahon natin ngayon, even if people are saying things are getting bad every single day, no. In fact, Christian dominance is happening in the world today. And that's the reason why partial preterists believe that this millennial reign of Christ is happening right now because Christians are dominating the world. Now, second coming, next nito, after the millennium, in the future, we don't know when, ito yung sinasabi na ni Christ sa Matthew chapter 25, now you don't know when the end of the world will come, when will be my second coming, so we have to be ready. This will happen in the future. But the rapture, the second coming, and the judgment, it happens at the same time. Ito yung binasa natin kanina. For the Lord Himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet of God. And the dead in Christ will rise first, then we who are alive and remain will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall always be with the Lord. Ang ganda ng term dito, yung caught up in the air. So there's no, ito sa perspective nito, walang secret rapture. Kasi everyone will see. You will be caught up in the air. Pero this will happen, ha? Ito, imagine nyo, ang ganda nitong description na to. So Jesus will come. He will come from heaven. He will be seen in the atmosphere on earth. Sabi dito, we will be caught up in the air. Ito yung description ng caught up, ng pagiging caught up. Base doon sa Greek term na to. It's like catching up with people going to meet a friend who just arrived at the local airport. When their friend arrives, they may come to meet him. Okay? Then they will not fly away with him in another airplane, but they will accompany him as he comes to their home. In a similar fashion, Jesus is returning not to take believers away, but to be with them on earth. Christians will meet him in the air, and they will hesitate in that place only for as long as it takes for Jesus to purge the earth of evil, a process that will be instantaneous, or almost so, because his glorious appearing will transform everything. So Christ will come, we will meet him on the air, he will purge the earth with sin, and then every one of us will come back to inhabit the earth with Jesus as our King, as our Savior for all eternity. That's how the second coming of Christ, the rapture, and the judgment will happen all at the same time. Right? So, and then after that, that's going to be the eternity with Jesus here on earth. Some people are saying, some preterists are saying, it's a new heaven and new earth. May konting nuances sa term na yun. So let's just say, it is the eternity with Christ in heaven right after his second coming. Now, Partial Preterism is generally known as the optimistic eschatology. Optimistic siya. Why? It's not going to talk about the disaster, no, that's happening in the world right now. It's not waiting for disaster, rather seeing the reign of Christ's kingdom grow even more. Yeah? It's also saying that we're better off 100, 200, 300, 2,000 years ago. Mas maganda ang mundo ngayon kaysa dati. Sabi kasi ng mga ibang futurist, ito na ngayon nabanggit ko kanina din, na talagang morally, the world is going to get worse and worse and worse. And maybe when you look at the news, when you look at what's going on right now, sa perspective natin, limited perspective natin ngayon, sasabihin natin, oo nga, no? Sumasama nga ang mundo. Pero no, if you're going to actually look at the world 200 years ago, when slavery is all over, when the actual, when not just slavery, pero barbaric killings are happening. At least ngayon may mga laws. Di ba? Or 2,000 years ago, during the time of Jesus, when they're under the occupation of the Roman Empire. Do you think the world is better off or not better off today than before? I disagree with that. Mas maganda ang buhay natin ngayon because of the influence of the Christian church here on earth. Now, and that's the reason why this particular view is called the optimistic eschatology. So, here's the thing. Summarize natin. Why I believe that partial preterism is better eschatology than futurism. And this is me, and as your pastor, I have an obligation to tell you what I believe. And you may disagree with me on this dahil nga sabi ko nga, we are okay to disagree on certain issues, mga secondary issues like this. We're not okay to disagree on, say, salvation. Kasi salvation is by grace alone, through faith alone. If you say you're going to be saved because even if you're going to be saved by doing good works, then we'll have to talk about it. That's a major issue. But for secondary issue like this, we're okay to disagree. But I have to tell you what I believe. Here are the things that the reason why I lean towards partial preterism. Number one is this. It stays faithful to the context of Matthew 24. Go back and read Matthew 24. You know what? For the longest time in my Christian life, I thought, meron akong palaging presupposition na tinatawag. Merong preconceived idea. Like yun na nga, when it talks about the coming of Christ, ang iniisip ko palagi, the second coming. Pero hindi naman ganun yun. You have to stick to the context of Matthew 24. And I think partial preterism was able to do that successfully. It will stick to the context of Matthew, of the Bible, and not interpret it from the lenses of what we are taught about, when we are taught by previous teachers that we learned from. That's number one. Number two, it is also not speculative theology or speculative eschatology. Hindi siya speculation. Hindi katulad ng futurism na palaging iniisip, atong nangyayari sa Israel, part ng end times yan. O kaya, yung mga chips, may mangyayari dyan mga chips. And again, I'm not mocking the perspective. Totoo naman to eh. Sinasabi naman talaga to sa news, sa mga ibang teachers, di ba? Ano yan? May mga chips na mangyayari yan, i-embed sa. Those are speculations. Whereas sa partial preterism, you're not actually speculating. Because everything happened already. So, pwede mo siyang i-confirm. Meron bang famine na nangyari nung before AD 70? Meron. Na-distract ba ang Jerusalem nung AD 70? Meron, nangyari yon. Di ba? Meron bang wars nung nangyari doon? Meron bang antichrist na nag-evolve nung time na yun? Meron. Di ba? So, pwede mo i-confirm. Hindi ka lang nag-speculate. So, I think the reason why I take this position is that it's not speculative eschatology. And lastly, this also has the balanced view of our times. Yung mga panahon natin ngayon, balance ang view niya. By avoiding some of the more sensational and speculative aspects of eschatology, partial preterism can help believers, you and I, maintain a balanced and sober view of the end times. This can lead to less anxiety and fear about the future events, and more focus on living faithfully in the present. So, hindi ka matatakot. Akin, sasabihin naman, iba, hindi naman nakakatakot ang futurist view. Good for you, good for them, and I truly am happy for you if you are not afraid of the future. But the reality is that most people that I know who have heard of and thought of these types of futurist eschatology, they were afraid of the future. And they probably need to have a better way of saying these things para wag sila matakot. Pero the reality is they are afraid of the future. But because, we are with the partial preterism, because we're not speculating all of this, quote-unquote, mga nakakatakot na events, we have a sober view of our present time. Hindi tayo nakafocus sa mga nangyayari sa paligid. In fact, we can even be transformative in our society kasi nakafocus tayo in living a kingdom life. That's what can make this partial preterism very attractive in my point of view. Now, paano natin ito i-apply? Paano na? Here's what we can do today, basing on what we have talked about for the past 2 weeks. Here's what you can do. Live your life for Christ's kingdom. Because we are now living in the Millenial Reign of Christ, if you'll believe in the partial preterism, you are now so free from fear and from doubts, and you can now expect life to grow even better. Gaganda ang buhay natin dito sa mundo dahil Christ is now reigning here on earth. He's reigning from heaven, but He has authority over things in heaven and on earth. And eventually, we're going to wait for the second coming of Christ, where we will be together, we'll be with Him, and everything else will be new. Lahat ng bagay, ang kasalanan sa mundo ay mawawala na. But today, sa ngayon, yeah, there will be suffering. There will still be disappointments, frustrations. You will still encounter some problems in this world because we're still living in this sin-sick world. Meron pa kasing kasalanan dito sa mundo. But while we're still living in this sin-sick world, we can be hopeful. And you can live a kingdom life. You can live a Christ kingdom life because we are now living in the reign of Christ in this world. We are free to do so. And so that's my encouragement for all of us today. Huwag tayong matakot sa mga nangyayari sa mundo ngayon. Ang mangyayari sa mundo ngayon, dahil meron tayong, the people in the world right now, all of us, we all have our free will. Some has their free will to create havoc on earth. Ganun talaga Gusto nila makipaggera, mangyayari talaga yon because they are free to do so. And yet, we believe that still Jesus is now reigning here on earth. And He will continue, the Christian church will continue to grow and grow and grow more influence amongst us. And eventually, we're waiting for that second coming of Christ where everything else will be judged. All the sins that we're seeing right now, all these things, the wars that are happening, all these people who are killing kids, who are killing innocent babies, innocent people, they will eventually be judged by the Almighty God. They will receive justice. They will receive, and the Church of Christ will receive the glory that it deserves